Hi, we're Richard and Jackie from Early Retirement Wanderlust, and in a few short weeks we are heading to the Outer Hebrides, which is an absolute island paradise, which really does feel like it's at the end of the earth.
But with this remoteness does come its own unique set of challenges. So in this video, we want to guide you through some of our planning processes and some of the things that we want to put in place before we actually get to the islands. So the Outer Hebrides, they are based in the far north of Scotland on the west coast. They are a set of islands that truly have the most spectacular scenery. Whether you are into wide expanses of white sandy beaches, there are so many beaches there. Whether you like hiking or you are into ancient history, there is something there for everyone.
But they are very remote, and visiting remote places has its own unique set of challenges. And one of the things that we want to tackle in this video is really the elephant in the room, which is responsible campervanning. And the Outer Hebrides has suffered in the past from some pretty irresponsible practices from visitors, and it's probably a small minority of visitors, but we've got to be really mindful and really careful to make sure that we nurture these wild and remote places so that we can continue visiting them, because at the moment, if you look at social media, there's quite high feelings about responsible campervanning, and we think it's our responsibility to make sure that we get that message across from what we do on our YouTube channel, but also what we do on our travels, to make sure that we can visit these beautiful places in a really responsible and sustainable way.
If you follow the channel, you'll know that on most of our road trips, when we set off, we actually have not a huge amount of idea where we're going to end up after the first day or two. But in this video, we want to share with you some of our planning process for this particular trip, because we have put a lot more thought into it about where we're going to go and what we're going to do.
But before that, have a look at this. We are so excited because this is our first ever product collaboration on the channel, and it'll come as no surprise that it is to do with a series of books.
And if you know us well, if you have followed the channel for a while, you will know that we absolutely love our travel books. We've got bookshelves full of them upstairs.
And if you've been following the channel for a while, you'll know that we don't recommend anything that we wouldn't use ourselves. And this is the first time that we feel that we want to put ourselves out there and actually recommend a series of books to you.
So the No Fuss travel guides are really quick and simple guidebooks to use, and we want to take you through our Outer Hebrides copy that we are going to be using to plan a trip that we're going on in the next couple of weeks.
I'm an absolute nerd when it comes to books. I know you might find that hard to believe, but I love the quality of this book. I love the quality of the print. I love the quality of the paper stock, and that does sound really nerdy. And I love the quality of the images. And it is just a really beautifully well presented book.
We love the fact that it's written in a really plain, common sense, no fuss kind of a way. It's really simple to pick up the guide and have a look through where you're wanting to go and what to do there. It has got QR codes so that you can quickly scan it and find the exact location of places that Robbie talks about. And he also uses what 3 words if you're really struggling with that.
It's really, really handy as well. It's almost glove box size, and we are absolutely going to take it with us, because you never know on the road when you're passing somewhere where you just want to dive in or you want a little bit more information, and it's so easily accessible. It'll come as no surprise that I absolutely love a plan when it comes to road trips, and what I really like about these No Fuss guides is that they give you a suggestion of itineraries, and that can be from a short weekend break all the way up to an extended road trip. And then the other thing is, in the back of the book, it's got a suggested framework for planning your itineraries and making your own itineraries. And most importantly of all, thinking about the budget for your road trips, which is something that sometimes we tend to neglect.
As well as a comprehensive list of must-see locations within the book, it's also got guides of places that you can eat, places to stay, and lots of the different beaches that are on the island. And we really like that it's coded for disability access and whether places are dog-friendly or not. When you order the book, you also get an option to order one of the travel maps that goes with it. And we really like the map because the book does go through chapter by chapter from the north of the Outer Hebrides down to the south. But just having the map in front of us so that because we're going to visit all of the islands, we can have an overview of which way we want to go and where we're going to go first is really handy instead of having to keep flicking through the book.
From any travel guide, you would expect that there would be a whole list of campsites and reviews of campsites, which we found absolutely invaluable when we're pre-booking our trip. But what we really liked at the back of the book is that there is a campsite index, which not only shows the location of all the campsites on the island, it also, really importantly, highlights the opening dates, which if you are going in the start or the end of the season, that's really important for your planning.
And the book's great. It's not just about going from campsite to campsite. It just gives us lots of ideas of things to do in the day when we're travelling between the different places.
We are absolutely delighted to say that Robbie Roams has put a special offer out for all our lovely subscribers to do with his No Fuss travel guides. And if you go to their website, and I'll put the link somewhere up there or down in the description below, and enter the code Wanderlust, when you purchase one of the guidebooks, you'll also get a free road trip map, and it'll also come with free tracked delivery, which we think is really good because, you know, we would have bought these anyway. So to get the map as well, it's just a really cheeky bonus.
And actually, when we did get an email asking us about a collaboration, we were literally about to order the Island book because our friend had been to Ireland and they had had the most wonderful trip and they had used the Robbie Roams book as a guide. He doesn't just do the Outer Hebrides and Ireland. There's a whole series of different books. Northumberland looks really good. We have got the Welsh guide because we've got a trip coming up to Wales. There are lots of different areas of the country for you to explore and there's a guidebook for them.
And interestingly, on the website as well, there's a couple of new publications that they've come up with beyond road trips, and it is to do with dog-friendly travel and also couple-friendly travel. So yeah, something for everyone within the No Fuss travel guides. And that's it. Our first ever collaborative ad. So let's get back to the video.
So our first big decision that we had to make was which ferry we were going to take. So we visited the islands quite a few times and we've generally concentrated on the northern islands. So we wanted to go into the south to Barra this time, and the best ferry for that was to go from Oban to Castle Bay on Barra. It's a really long ferry. It is about 5 hours. It's the longest ferry that you can take to get to the Outer Hebrides, but the advantage of that is you can get to Oban so much more easily than actually having to drive all the way up to Ullapool.
There are a variety of different routes that you can get to the islands. It starts from the south, as Jackie said, into Castle Bay, but you could go into Loch Boisdale, moving north, Loch Maddie, Tarbert or Stornoway. Obviously, the further north you go, you've got a longer drive on the mainland to get to those ferry ports. So it's a bit of a sort of a balancing situation. In the past, we went into the sort of middle of the island section, into the Uist, and one of the problems there is you land slap bang in the middle of the island. So you've then got to go north to then go south, or south to then go north. So what we're trying to do is travel responsibly, and to keep our ferry crossings to a minimum and to keep our driving to a minimum, we're going to dive in at Castle Bay, and then we are going to go from the very south of the islands all the way up through the islands and then leave through the north.
Obviously, unless you're based in Scotland, you will probably have quite a lengthy drive to get to one of the ferry ports. So in planning your trip, you probably need to have a day before you get the ferry and the day after you get the ferry to make sure you've got time to get home. The ferries are generally quite early in the morning, so you need to be in Scotland ready to get them.
And it's really important to be organised as well, which is very much unlike us. So we booked all our ferry crossings because we wanted to make sure that A, we could get on the ferries, and B, that we're not just taking up places on the roll-up tickets, because that's unfair because quite a lot of locals use that facility on the ferries to get on and off and between the islands. So at least if we've got a place booked, they know that we're arriving on the ferries and they know that there's space available for other passengers. So in terms of booking your ferries, it couldn't actually be easier. It's almost like turning up for a bus. If you go onto the CalMac website, it is actually really user-friendly as long as you know your port names, which can be a bit of an issue.
Something I would recommend, and we've been caught out with this, is particularly on your homeward journey, make sure you maybe book a ferry a day earlier than you thought you might need it. We have actually been stuck on Harris before now when a storm came in. Luckily, we were early retired. We weren't rushing to get back for anything particular, so it didn't make a huge amount of difference to us. But when we were teaching, we always used to make sure we got the ferry back on the Saturday, not relying on a Sunday ferry, because you don't want to be stuck on those islands and not be able to get back to work.
In terms of planning our route, we are really fortunate because we have got 2.5 weeks to explore the islands. Now, that seems a long time, but there is so much to see and do, and you've got to try and balance between whether you want an immersive experience and take your time, or whether you want an expansive tour and try and cover everything. And what we're doing is just trying to block out our time as we move through the islands.
So as we said, we're starting our journey on Barra because that's where the ferry gets in. We've allocated ourselves 4 days. We have got 2 nights on Vatersay, which is one of the southern islands, and then we've got 2 nights on the north.
And we've got to then get off Barra, and we have got the world's tiniest ferry booked. I remember it well from probably one of our first trips to the island. It was absolutely terrifying having a tiny van on a tiny ferry going across a choppy sea. And we head across to the Uis. Now, the Uis are a very long stretch of interlinked islands, and we're going to allocate about 5 days to explore that. We've got some campsites booked, and we've also earmarked some community parking spaces which run on an honesty box system. But yeah, we are then going to pass through the Uis, which is quite a bit of driving. Most of it is causeway before we then catch our next ferry.
Yeah, so the ferry takes us on to the Isle of Harris. Now, Harris is probably the biggest honeypot area that most people that go to the Outer Hebrides want to visit. It's the place that's got all the world-renowned beaches, Luscontyre probably being the most famous, and it's also probably the most contentious area for campervanners and the responsible camping. So we have booked different campsites along the coastal areas of Harris. We've booked one at the West Harris Trust Community Centre, which we've been to before, and it's got really nice facilities there. And we have a total of 4 nights around that area.
And then we're going to move on to the final phase of the trip, which is going to be a full week on the sort of northern Harris and Isle of Lewis. And that's a huge expanse of land, and there is a whole host of things to visit there. So there are the Callanish Stones, there are some wild and remote beaches up at Neep, and we're trying to keep flexible there because we know that that's going to be after the Easter break. So quite a lot of the campsites are very definitely going to be open, and there are loads of places that we have earmarked to visit. And then at the end of the trip, we are looking to catch our ferry from Tarbert, and that's going to go back to Uig on the Isle of Skye, and we are going to thread our way home from there. In order to keep our campervan trip really responsible to the Outer Hebrides, we're going to unashamedly nick some stuff from the No Fuss Travel Guides by Robbie Roams on the Outer Hebrides being a special place, and using the place acronym to just remind us of a few things that are really important to ensure that we remain responsible tourists.
So the first letter, P for parking, and just making sure that you are really thinking about responsible parking, making sure that you're not stopping in the passing places and leaving your car there so that people can't pass each other, not parking on the delicate macaire beach sides and the delicate grasses there, making sure that you're not blocking people's driveways and their access to different farming routes.
You'd like to think the next point is pretty self-explanatory. L is for litter, and making sure that you clean up after yourself, leave the place better, and ideally take your litter home with you. Because we are going to be visiting a remote island community, the bin men don't come around that often, so quite often, if we are wanting to be responsible tourists, we should bag our rubbish with us and take it to a place where we can dump it responsibly, rather than it just being filling up the local bins, because they're not going to get emptied quite as often as you would think on the mainland.
The A is for animals, making sure that if you've got dogs with you and you are going into areas with livestock, that you keep your dogs on the leads, and if on some of the beaches they are no dog beaches, that you respect that. And just in general with the livestock and the wonderful variety of wildlife that you might come across, that you kind of leave them to themselves.
C is for camping, and this is probably one of the most contentious issues on the islands, and We want to just keep it as responsible as possible, and we are going to be using as many campsites as we possibly can. That means that you can camp responsibly, it means that you are leaving no trace, and it means that you are putting money into the local community.
And the E is for engage. Just thinking about that local community that you're wanting to become part of for those weeks that you're travelling, making sure that you are using the local facilities and putting back into the community, using the local shops, and just generally following the Scottish Wildlife Access Codes so that you are not hindering or causing problems to the locals.
And just generally be nice, be smiley, be polite, be courteous to people, and it's amazing what you'll get back in return, because the islanders are really proud of their islands and they want to show them off to the very, very best, and they will welcome smiley, happy people that are just enthused about visiting their home islands. And within the No Fuss travel guides, there's some really good links to external documentation, so I'll try and put those on the screens. One of which is to the islands produced document on advice and guidance for responsible campervan and motorhome visitors, and we've used that before, and it's a really useful document written by the islanders for what they want to see from campervan and motorhome users. And then the other link is to the Scottish Outdoor Access Code, which is really important when you are visiting anywhere north of the border.
Something I will say, adding to Richard's talk about engaging with people in the community, we have had some absolutely wonderful times on the islands. We have sat in some of the community cafes and just chatted with the locals. We tend to go out of season so that it's not busy with tourists, and we have had some wonderful afternoons.
And I would say, probably don't let your judgment be clouded by some of the things that you see on social media, because there can be quite a bit of sort of sensationalism and negativity about perhaps visiting the islands. And we, in our many visits to the islands, have not seen any of that. And we are really, really looking forward to getting back, because we think that the islander community is so welcoming as long as you behave in a respectful and responsible way.
So as we said at the beginning, we have booked most of our campsites. In fact, we've booked all of our campsites now for this trip. Sometimes that's actually been easier said than done. Some of the websites are maybe a little bit trickier to navigate, but what we have found is a quick phone call to most campsite owners. They will get back to us within 24 hours and we've managed to book pretty easily.
Yeah, pretty easily, but not in the same way. So there are a variety of ways of booking. Some it can be down to a phone call, others will want a deposit. One campsite we're visiting just took our name and said, see you on whatever date. So it's a very sort of relaxed system. And because we are travelling at the start of the season, it hasn't quite been as simple as perhaps if you were travelling in the height of the season.
Yeah, there have been a couple of campsites that we really wanted to go and stay at that aren't open until after we've left. Some of that's down to them being farming communities and it's lambing season. So yeah, just being careful. Where we can't get onto a campsite, there is also a great honesty box system, lots of community facilities that you can use.
Yeah, and we can access those through the Park for Night app, and that highlights free parking spaces and also honesty box systems. And we are limiting ourselves entirely on this trip to the honesty box systems, because we want to use sites and locations where the local community are happy with that, and that we can feel that we are putting a little bit of money back into that community. So there are a number of sites and they are absolutely wonderful. Some have facilities, so some will have a toilet block and showers available. Others will literally have nothing but a water tap and perhaps a dustbin.
From our previous experience, we have found that there are shops available on all of the islands. They are mainly co-op shops. They're not the hugest and they don't have the biggest variety and range of food, but you can restock. So you don't need to go to the islands with your vans rammed full of food. You will be able to get food there. The one thing we did learn is that we do take maybe 2 or 3 kind of long-lasting emergency meals, so that if we find ourselves on a peninsula somewhere and there isn't any shops open or there aren't any shop facilities easily available, then we can still eat. And on the subject of shops open, Sundays. On the Outer Hebrides, we have found if you are travelling on a Sunday, there is very little open. There might be the odd cafes. We've actually been in Stornoway before now, where we were trying to find a pub open on a Sunday afternoon to just have a pint, and we found that tricky. The Outer Hebrides are in very northern, very remote parts of Scotland, so be prepared for weather of all shapes and forms. We're going in April, so we are going to go from full winter hiking gear that we're taking with us with our full-on waterproofs, but we'll probably also take shorts and t-shirts and maybe a pair of flip-flops as well, because who knows what the weather will be like. I'm sure it won't be hot sunbathing weather, but you never know.
And linked to the weather, you also need to be aware of the effect that that has on the ferry system, as I've mentioned earlier in the video. Some of the small ferries will probably keep going through some pretty rough conditions, so the inter-island ferries are not too bad, and they are pretty reliable because they tend to be roll-on, roll-off basis, whereas the bigger ferries can be stopped because of bad weather or stopped because of the potential of bad weather fronts. So you need that little bit of flexibility in your planning for any potential delays, because they do happen, and they do happen whatever time of the year.
And then finally, just a note to try and monitor your LPG and fuel, just making sure that if you've gone through a town and you maybe have only got half a tank of petrol, that you're probably better filling up there, because you might not know where the next fuel is going to come from. We have been, which did make us really laugh, right out on a peninsula going towards a beach called Neep Beach, and we did come across the world's smallest garage. It was also quite expensive, but there are fuel stations around, but they're few and far between. And LPG, particularly if you're in a motorhome and you need the gas for your water systems, we don't use much gas, it's only for cooking. It's just knowing where you can refill.
So that's it. We hope you have enjoyed our little insight into our planning for the Outer Hebrides. We cannot wait to get on the road, because it's a place that we love, and it is a place that genuinely feels like a otherworldly adventure, because you're getting on the ferries, you're island hopping, and you are going to some of the most remote and beautiful places that you could potentially visit, we think, in the UK.
And talking about visiting places in the UK, if you are thinking of any travel plans that might be UK based this year, don't forget to check out the No Fuss Travel link that we will have posted somewhere, and have a look at the different guides that Robbie Roams has produced, because they are wonderful.
So that's it from us. Probably the next time you'll hear from us will be next week, when we will be starting our journey to the Outer Hebrides. We can't wait to get going. See you later. Bye.
Bye.